So I'm going to just say a few words to set up the session. Feel free to sit, stand any place you want, and don't make it too neat. As Meta's right, because I get always nervous when things are in straight lines. So, as you might imagine, one of the really fun things, and in many ways maybe one of the most important things in hosting gatherings of this sort, is you bring people together who really have never really gotten to know each other and ought to know each other. That also happens to be true for often the, quote, presenters. So we have two folks here. I almost made a big mistake. I want to apologize, Rebecca. I started to introduce you as being from MIT, but I quickly caught myself. Okay. Anyhow, so Rebecca Henderson and Deb Roy are both from Cambridge. Deb is here at the Media Lab and has been at MIT for a long time. Rebecca and I first met when she was also a faculty member in the Sloan School. She's actually now at the Harvard Business School. And they'll tell you both a little bit their own stories. But it's been a great opportunity to get them together. They have a common kind of mentor, friend, guide for many of us, a man named Marshall Ganz. You may or may not know Marshall's work in community organizing, which has had a big influence on many levels. So I won't say any more other than it's just a pleasure to have both of you here. Really appreciate you taking the time. And I'll let you, so the basic plan for the session is Deb is going to give his short presentation, then Rebecca will give hers, and then we'll just have some open conversation. Okay? Take it away.
Well, thank you. I'm going to set my timer here for 15 minutes. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Peter. My name is Deb Roy, and I'm going to start with playing for you a 1-minute video that our team at the MIT Center for Constructive Communication put together to answer the question, why did we start the center a few years ago? It grew out of the Media Lab. So let me start with that video.
Technology promised a new era of communication, but set to full blast, always on, everywhere at once. It made public conversation faster, louder, and bigger, but also distorted, noisy, and harsh. It's no wonder that only the loudest voices dominate and divide, and trust is scarce. But what if we could build something new? Design a different future for how we connect, by weaving ancient wisdoms about human connection into a new generation of tools built for understanding, not overwhelming, for scaling, but only at the speed of trust. Technologies that turn up the values, not just the volume.
So a belief that guides our work at the Center for Constructive Communication, what we call C3 for short, is that hearing the humanity in others is necessary for democracy to function. And what that means on the ground is for schools, for communities, this is an essential kind of requirement. And yet, the lens that I and a lot of my colleagues started this work through was that of social media. I was once Twitter's chief media scientist, spent a few years running analytics globally for the platform. I've done a lot of work in AI and technology and its intersection with communication and media. It's a little bit about my background. But if you give anyone the ability to pick up a bullhorn, some will learn how to use it effectively. And one of the consequences of social media has become clear is one of exasperating social fracture, kind of fragmentation. There's a lot of causes that are coming together, but that's certainly one of them. And so in 2016, we started a shift in our attention away from analyzing social media, which is what we were doing at scale, to learning from dialogue practitioners under what conditions higher quality conversation can actually be achieved, and how to use some of those lessons from what we call ancient wisdoms to shape the use of technology in new ways. And that's what I wanted to take my remaining 12 minutes to give you a quick sense of. So here's the idea that started to form. Rather than throwing a lot of people into one big open space, which is what social media tends to do, we start with small groups that actually have some pre-existing connections or reasons to trust one another. So circles of trust in quiet spaces that experience guided conversations. And we've spent a lot of time now learning about developing conversation guides, in particular that foster the sharing of experiences rather than opinions. And there's a human facilitator, and key to our approach, these conversations with permission are recorded. So these conversations could happen in person. That's the preferred mode around a recording device. They can happen over something like Zoom if the host records, or now with a custom app, which we've just started testing actually with the MIT community. The reason to have these conversations recorded is so that we can form networks, and that's sort of the key idea, is to have a different kind of network topology for how people share content with one another. So the reason to record is we can create tools to make it easy to highlight excerpts from these small group conversations. And so one way, again, the technology for this, just to make it concrete, if you use the app we've developed, everyone who's in the small group conversation, as soon as the conversation's over, receives a transcript along with the speech recording of the group they were in, and they can take a part of what they saw, what they heard in that conversation, and make what we call a highlight. And that picks up both the text and the speech. There's a whole consent architecture, so the person whose speech would get shared gives consent, and if they do, one of the things we can then do is what we call cross-pollination. So I want to actually share a couple of excerpts of voice just to give you a sense of what we now have had thousands of people experience through this process. I actually went back and pulled out one of the original pollens for cross-pollination. So Kathy Kramer is an important person in this whole work, and with Kathy, we piloted in Madison, Wisconsin in 2018, and she had a group of her colleagues in one of the first conversations, including an Asian American faculty member that was a colleague at University of Wisconsin. And our intent was to start some conversations between urban and rural communities in Wisconsin. So I'm just going to play for you what was for me a kind of a powerful story that just came out of one of those first conversations that we used in some of the original cross-pollinations.
So growing up in Wisconsin as a Chinese person and not having a lot of other Chinese people in my community, I never really thought about it that much in Madison, but a very vivid childhood memory is driving across country and stopping, on the way to Yellowstone Park to get hamburgers in a small town and entering the restaurant and having it just go completely silent and having everybody just watch us the whole time that we ate. And I am still incredibly uncomfortable in small towns.
I play this because whenever I've used this in small group conversations, very often it reminds people of experiences they've had. And so I just want to give you a sense of the texture of what is representative of now tens of thousands of highlights that have emerged from these small group conversations. And so one way to put this piece of technology to use is where two groups, if you brought them into one room, there'd be more resistance. It'd be more unlikely that someone would share if they felt people who've never heard their perspective were in the room with them. Somewhat paradoxically, the technology that creates some distance where you're just speaking within your circle of trust can create a kind of intimacy in the listening experience for a group on the other side. The second example I want to give you is if there are more conversations, if we could scale these sorts of small group conversations with shared prompts, then we've been developing tools and approaches to enable a kind of AI-assisted sense-making, essentially to discover themes or patterns that occur across conversations and interpret those, contextualize them, and then create different forms of outputs to share those back. Just to give you a sense again of what the tools look like, I'm not going to go into a lot of detail, but each of those highlights, this is a desktop view of a kind of AI-assisted sense-making tool we've built. So this is kind of like a voice post-it. You can hit play and listen. Over here, we've got themes that have been identified by a human sense-making team. So this says family, community, and support. There's a definition of what that theme means. And there's an AI tool built in that can suggest which themes would apply to this particular piece of content. The human sense maker can accept the AI reasoning, and then these tags get attached. So what's happening here is this chunk of lifted out of a conversation has been given several codes. It says crime and policy, family, community support. And if you were to go through and pick up all of the highlights that share, for example, crime and policing, kind of like beads on a string, you could hold up the pattern that actually lift up stories or excerpts from different conversations, and then the sense maker could interpret that and in various ways share the results. So sharing is the last part. So from small group conversations, understand patterns, and then share. And that sharing can enable a different way for the group to become aware of what is being said in these small group conversations. And often the outputs are also made public. So I have a quick example to share with you. This is from work that we're actively doing with this extraordinary group in Newark, the Newark Opportunity Youth Network. They work, this particular project was to lift up experiences of young people 14 to 24 who are having trouble remaining in school or finding work, to understand underlying reasons for why. A very difficult kind of topic to get real sort of a real understanding using surveys or focus groups. So I'm going to just play for you one form of output, which is what we call a voice medley. So it's after the sense making and themes have been revealed, there's a curation of excerpts of different voices that are put together. So this is about a 2-minute sequence, just to give you a sense of some of the actual voices from this active work. One thing that's key here is it's a group of youth fellows who are in their sort of late teens, early 20s that actually led the whole process, from inviting in peers to facilitating the conversation, so using the tools to creating the outputs.
Being the second oldest of my family is more a responsibility on me. I got a little brother and I got a sister, so I'm really trying to get them up for school and trying to help them with their homework and stuff like that. It was like, when do I even have time for school? When do I have time for myself?
I was basically like this kid's mom, and having to be a teenage mother to a kid that is not even yours, I didn't realize all of this shouldn't be happening. I should be in school right now, not picking up my little brother. It's just a lot of things at home.
I feel like for us, nobody experienced as much loss as we took. Like, we got friends we really grew up with, like from the sandbox, like 3 years old, and it's like, they gone. And it be like, mentally, we don't be here. Like, I'm here, I'm walking around, I'm pulling this mask, I'm gonna make y'all feel like I'm good, I'm okay, but I'm hurting, like I'm really in pain.
Sometimes it can be really like, we have problems at home, or sometimes we can't make it to school because of what's going on. We can be going through stuff mentally, like you could be stressed and depressed, because some people, they don't come to school because like they feel stressed about the environment, or like the people they're around is like not good for them, or it's just like so much happening they can't deal with things.
I got locked up, and then I came out the next day, and then I came trying to like do everything, but it's like it was too much. Like I couldn't do job work and things, and like it's got me feeling disconnected.
Some teacher don't connect with young African American Black people, young people who've been through things, young people who go through struggles, loses people. Y'all need to have not even just to connect with students, but like to understand, we hear your voice, we want to hear what you thinking, how you feeling. I was full of anger. I'm not going to be in school. I was wholeheartedly announcing, I'm going to be a dropout. I'm going to be a dropout. I was going to be a dropout because I didn't feel like I fit in. I wasn't learning what I really wanted to learn. Like, I wasn't learning about life. I wanted to learn, like, about what my adult life was going to be like. Yeah, I think the academics is good, but as I graduate, what's next?
So that's one form of output. Another is what we call a voice portal, also made by this same youth group. So this is actually a public website. If anyone's interested, I can point you to later. If you scroll down, there's actually a more systematic presentation of the patterns. So how often did different themes, sense of belonging, mental health, life outside the classroom come up? If you're interested in clicking into sense of belonging, you get a further breakdown, school climate, being misunderstood by teachers, staff, and then you can click over here and get a narrative form, a kind of the story of stories, if you will. And throughout, and this is written by the youth team that led the project, in each of these links is to a voice citation, so stories kind of woven back in. So I'm out of time, so I'm going to take 2 minutes to just wrap up. So we've been exploring various use cases in Madison to go from community conversations to helping select the interview questions for hiring the new police chief. We have work that's now 3 years running in Freeport High School, began with a real communication breakdown between student body and student administration, and we were brought in, kind of real breakdown in trust in the moment where we're invited in. The key was that a group of high school leaders were entrusted with learning how to use the tools, and they could invite peers in. They tuned the facilitation guide themselves. There's a lot of agency, reins handed to the students that I think really led to a success there. We have a nonprofit organization we started called Cortico that essentially lets us take research, prototype, and pilot together with the team at MIT and then scale. And that's let us bring this method out to now over 200 organizations, including local government, youth-centered organizations. Emerging areas include universities, and actually MIT, our president here, has asked us to bring this method into our own campus. So we have a pretty big program that's just started last fall. So my last slide. This is sort of the concept that comes out of all of this, that what we're actually trying to create are scalable networks of a different kind that are rooted in small group conversation. And just highlighted here are human roles that are really an essential part of this approach. We're not trying to automate the different roles, but actually create opportunities for people to learn how to shape conversation spaces in their communities. So compared to social media, where all content starts as posts, here in a conversation network, you don't post, you host. You host a conversation, you have talk, and you highlight, and that is the principal source of content that flows through the network. So the quality is actually being inherited from those circles of trust and those facilitated conversations. We're not aiming for viral or broadcast. In fact, the topology makes it hard to broadcast. You're just shouting at a small group. And instead, there's this idea of things spreading at the speed of trust if you give consent for your speech to work, to move. And rather than being focused on what's trending in the moment, instead, it's what's resonating over time. That sense-making process doesn't care if the theme was picked up over a long period, over a short period. So that's the idea, and to put it into work in communities, there's a really important organizing component, hence the Marshall Ganz kind of link to this, which is teams that can actually organize this kind of approach in their communities for different purposes, for listing, for bridging, for facilitation. So that's what we're up to, and we're developing training programs. And a key idea is each of these different roles we see as a kind of civic muscle, and we're not interested in AI replacing those capabilities any more than if you're trying to build physical muscle, you wouldn't want robots to lift the weights for you. Robots could help you build physical strength, but in the same way, we're constantly looking at how to weave technology in to enforce the building of muscle. Sorry, 3 minutes over time, but thank you so much.